CBS News 24/7 continues breaking news coverage of a school shooting out of Georgia. Our eye on Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia. That's about an hour outside of Atlanta. And here's your headline at this hour. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the local sheriff there confirm a shooting at that school and casualties. They also confirm one suspect is in custody. Now let's take you back in time as we look at some of the video that our partners have been able to get from that scene. The school went on lockdown quickly after the first calls came out of that high school around 10:23 a.m. Georgia time. Police and emergency personnel raced to the scene as that school quickly went on that lockdown. Then dozens of police units, ambulances surrounded the school. We've even seen video of helicopters landing there. Students also taken to a football stadium where it appears there's a track facility to sort of corral all of those students in one area. Reporters on the scene tell us that multiple ambulances have taken victims to trauma units nearby. Now, that same reporter saying more than one medical helicopter also taking victims to a trauma center. We can tell you there is a response from leadership there in the state of Georgia. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, looking at video just like you are looking at here on the stream, and moments ago directed all state resources to respond to aid in this incident. We also know interagency cooperation continues with the FBI. The feds are on this one. They are coordinating in that response at the high school. Again, this is at Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia, about 50 miles away from Atlanta. And that's where we find CBS News reporter Jared Eggleston. He's been live on this scene for about an hour. So our eyes have been on ambulances. We've been hearing the reports of helicopters. Just how many ambulances have you seen coming and going from that scene?
Reed, over the last hour or so, ambulances, I would say dozens, 2 or 3 dozen ambulances have been coming and going from this scene here. That has sort of died down within the last 15 minutes or so. But you mentioned those medical helicopters. That one that I saw circling when I first got here landed, but it's still here. And then the other one that was circling also left. But there is still a significant police presence here, and also a significant parent preference. One of the parents telling me that she went over to the football field to try to get her student and that she was having trouble. The school is still trying to count these students. So as you know, in these very fluid breaking news situations, it's a lot of chaos and a lot of people just searching for answers. Those people who are really searching for answers right now are the parents who are just trying to reunite with their loved ones, their students.
And Jared, we're seeing on the screen those ambulances right there. And just a second ago, we saw one person being loaded onto that ambulance. We want to be clear to our viewers who are watching all over the world right now on CBS News 24/7. We do not know what casualties mean in this case. We do not know if any of the victims of this shooting are teachers or students. That all is information that is yet to come. But right there, you see community members there, one person taking off his shirt to put on one of the persons who's sitting there with a blanket over them. Also, we're seeing right now, Jared, on the screen, emergency personnel going into that school. Others gathered right there by a stretcher underneath the Georgia and the American flag flying. We know in these cases that every time we hear of a bullet flying in a school, this is somebody that's involved. That's no doubt got to be the heartbeat of all of these parents who are coming to the scene. Where are the parents right now? What are they being told about getting their students out of that school?
Initially, when I got here, I was along this sidewalk right in front of the school where a lot of the media has gathered, and it was just swarmed with parents. A lot of them even left their cars as they just rushed towards the school. A lot of the parents have moved over towards the football stadium over here so that they could be reunited. But as I said, a lot of the parents are still kind of rushing to the scene. I would say for about a mile or 2 radius around the school, parents are just ditching their cars on side streets, on areas where you wouldn't normally park a car. That's an active roadway, and rushing over to that football stadium to try to get answers. I do know that the students have been evacuated out there, and the school district says that they are actively working to reunite the students and the families.
We also want to let our viewers know that it is our understanding that a suspect is in custody. That may inform our view and our understanding of why it looks like there's some movement there. Jared, we'll check back in with you a little bit later here on the stream. Thank you for that report. We know you have a lot of work to do today. So we also have a CBS affiliate coverage that we want to get you to right now. Often, these stories are best told right there on the ground level with our network of CBS partners. Let's listen into their coverage.
Yeah, Lana, we have been speaking with parents, but I want to bring in Mark Knotts. He's a witness. He lives across the street from the high school. You don't have any children, Mark, but you said that you live across the street, and just tell us what you heard this morning.
Well, this morning when I woke up, I heard gunshots, and several of them. I couldn't tell exactly how many, so I went outside to smoke my cigarette like I do every morning. And I noticed about 5 minutes after that, cop cars were everywhere. Surrounding 6 counties were everywhere. I'm talking about 1,000 cop cars. And I knew something was seriously wrong. And then I seen all the cars pulling on the side of the road and everything. And I just, I pray that, everybody's all right. And the people that have passed away, if there has been anybody, I just pray for their families and everything. And like I said, I just had to get away, and I'm just commuting to the store real quick. So,
shortly after you heard those gunshots, did people start coming out of the school?
It was crazy. Like it looked like I didn't really pay no attention to it at first. I was like, those sound like they were at the school. And I look over, and then the alarms started going off, like the school alarms, and people were going out around the school, and like they're doing like the drill, like the drill, fire drill stuff is what I seen. And then I knew something was seriously wrong then. And you don't hear about that happening. You hear about it happening all around the world, but it just shows that it can happen anywhere. And
this community's pretty small, tight knit. I mean, it's usually
There's no seriously gunplay or nothing like that goes on around Bethlehem. It hasn't been for years. It hasn't been that I can remember, and I'm 35 years old, so it's not really likely. So apparently, I don't know. I don't have no details, but apparently something was going on with somebody's mental. So that just shows that people need to be more aware of their children, if it was a child, about their mental state, because nobody never knows what the next man can do.
And those are details we're still trying to work out as far as what happened and what the motive may have been. But thank you so much, Mark, for your time. You as well. And Mark was telling us he lives right across from the high school. He says, of course, it's just been chaos out there this morning. All kinds of police officers, parents, children. He was actually walking towards us with his head down. He said, I just need to step away from this for a little bit. He said he's walking up to the store to just take a breath. I mean, even people that really aren't involved with what happened at the school, this is a very highly emotional time for everybody in this community, guys.
Yeah, Chelsea, he mentioned mental health, and Representative Esther Panich actually did say that today. I know there's still a lot more emphasis on what has happened, but she did note for anybody affected or traumatized by what's happening right now at Appalachia High School, you can dial 988 and get help. This is such a horrible situation. And Chelsea, while we still have you here, I just wanted you to see if you could fill in what you've been hearing from parents. I know we don't have anybody who's willing to go live with you right now. As you can imagine, they are just trying to get to their babies and try to figure out what's going on there. But can you just fill us in of what you've heard from parents that you've talked to as they've rushed by you to get to the school?
Yeah, we spoke with a grandmother who is very distraught. She was walking down the street here. Her grandson is okay, and she's so thankful that he's okay. But she said he was in the room where a classmate was shot. So she's very thankful that her grandson is doing fine. But she says, of course, mentally, this is going to be very hard and something he's not going to forget the rest of his life. We also spoke with another woman who said she was the older sister of a girl here that's 14 years old. And she was also racing down this street here to get there and pick her sister up. She said she was okay, but was completely shaken up. Said she got a phone call from her crying this morning saying there's an active shooter. Please come pick me up. And I think we do have some of that soundbite that we'll play for you now. Is she okay? Have you talked to her?
Yeah, I've talked to her. She's a little nervous. They're on the football field waiting on the parents to come get them. She's very nervous.
Did she hear the gunshots?
I don't know. She didn't tell me. She just called us and said, could you hurry up and come get us? There's an active shooter here. And my first thing was to make sure she was okay. Nobody was hurt. So that's my biggest concern.
When you heard there was an active shooter?
Yeah, my heart started beating. I was actually on my way to go to work. And then I just dropped everything and I just got in the car and I left. The traffic was so bad at the front. I was in the middle of the red light and people were blowing, but there was nothing I could do. So the main thing is to make sure these kids are okay. So
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, have a good luck. Be safe. And you can see we did that interview as she was almost jogging down to the school. This road here, Tom Miller Road, you can see people walking down it still at this hour, trying to get here, get off work and collect their children from the high school following the shooting that took place here this morning. Again, a lot of parents have made contact with their children and learned that they're okay, but we did speak with another mom who came up to us crying. She said she couldn't get in touch with her son, who's a senior here, was asking us for information, which of course we're still trying to get for everybody at home as well. We know that the sheriff's office is going to be holding a press conference shortly that Adam Murphy will be covering for us, guys.
All right, Chelsea, thanks very much. Your heart goes out to all.
You're watching CBS News 24/7, dipping into our CBS partner there in Winder, Georgia. Once again, the headline, a school shooting at Appalachia High School. And we want to get you these late-breaking details from 2 law enforcement sources. We can now confirm 2 dead, 4 wounded, suspect now in custody. So a lot to unpack here. I'm just hearing right now that law enforcement is going to give us that promised news conference that you just heard our partner in the field talk about. Let's go ahead and listen in right now.
2 minutes.
All right. So here's what happens in situations like these. Once in a while, they come to the microphone, but then they stop to gather a little bit more information. So we understand any moment now that law enforcement official will step to the microphone and really in these situations give us very clear information. We have been able to confirm through those 2 law enforcement sources, once again, 2 dead, 4 wounded. But in situations like these, one of the challenges for law enforcement, in addition to making sure that they get the suspect, in addition to making sure that the wounded get to where they need to get, in addition to keeping the scene tight so that people are safe and that investigation can be bulletproof, so to speak. A terrible term to use there, but so that they can really investigate and do a good job in their investigation. The other thing that they need to do is clear through any misinformation that might spread on social media. We live in times right now that what you see on X may not immediately be true. So those news conferences are important things to happen because that is where you hear it directly from the people who are there at the scene. They will be able to tell us more about the injured, the victims, and how this all played out. So let's go ahead now and listen in. It appears he is getting ready to speak right now. Once again, outside of a high school, Appalachia High School, Winder, Georgia. We understand 1,900 students went to school there this morning expecting to get an education, but instead terror at school. Listen.
Smith, I'm the sheriff of Bexar County Sheriff's Office. We're standing on the campus of Appalachia High School here at Bexar County Schools. First and foremost, I want to lift up our community. I want to give our sympathies to our community, our school system, our kids, our parents that had to witness this today. Obviously, what you see behind us is an evil thing today. At about 9:30 this morning, we received the first call that there was an active shooter on this campus. We're not releasing any information as far as injuries, but we have multiple injuries. This is a very, very fluid investigation. It's very early. And I have asked the assistance of the GBI and the agencies here behind me today, and there are multiple agencies that responded this morning to help us and help the sheriff's office. We do have a suspect in custody. And we are asking for your patience as the media to please let us get the facts that we need to make sure we get this right. Again, I've asked the GBI to help us, the sheriff's office, to help us along with this. I know this is not what you want to hear, but I'm not going to answer questions after this is over with. But I wanted to give you the respect and our community respect to let them know what was going on initially. We're in the process of reunifying our students with their parents. Obviously, that's chaotic, but we want to be respectful of them and their privacy as well. I want to thank the state, the federal agencies, the local agencies that showed up today, as you can see, the multiple EMS and fire from other agencies that responded today. Again, I ask that you lift up Bexar County Schools, lift up Appalachia, lift up our agencies. This is going to take multiple days for us to get answers as to what happened and why this happened. But I wanted to give you a statement. It is our hope, in conjunction with these people behind us, that we can give you another statement around 4 o'clock, because I know you have to go back on the air. That is my hope. But I wanted to be fluid with you all, understanding that it's fluid as well with this investigation. I appreciate you being patient with us. Again, it's very active and is ever developing. Every minute it's developing on what we're finding. So we're going to have releases from other schools. Again, we ask that you be patient with us. Please be patient with us. And hopefully I can give you more information or more better information as you will, if you will, this afternoon. Thank you all for coming out here. We'll be back shortly, okay?
Sheriff, it's been widely reported that people are dead. Is that true?
I'm not releasing any information. We have multiple injuries.
Can you say if the person in custody is an adult or a juvenile?
I'm not releasing any information. Guys, I'm not going to answer any more questions. It's time, okay? Thank you.
All right, so as these things go, we are hearing just a little bit more information. That sheriff saying he's not going to release any more information, but CBS News, through 2 law enforcement sources, has been able to confirm 2 dead, 4 injured. Let's listen into the next person stepping to the mic.
Following us on Twitter, X, make sure you're following us. We'll be providing updates then. I know there are a lot of details, investigative details. You want more information. That is what the investigators are actively working on right now. You can add.
Yeah, so the idea will be to be back here at 4 o'clock, but keep an eye on our social media. If that changes, you'll know it. We'll be able to hopefully answer more questions for you, okay? Or be in a position to give you more answers. We'll just have to see how things go.
We just realized this was happening. Tell us how many people, what you know about that.
We're not in any kind of position. The sheriff's made his comments. We'll leave it at that. By 4 o'clock, we hope to have a better picture, a bigger, so you can better comprehend what's going on. Okay, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, so you are seeing a measured response by officials there outside of Appalachia High School right now. And that's how often these things go. They go out and they want to let the public know just what they are able to say, but they have to be very careful about what they say and when they say it. They said they do not want to get this wrong. However, this stuck out to me, and I'm sure it stuck out to you watching right now on the stream. That sheriff calling what happened there at Appalachia High School an evil thing. He said what happened and why it happened will take many days to figure out. So once again, a shooting at Appalachia High School, Winder, Georgia. This is a small community, but a large high school. 1,900 students inside that high school went to school this morning, all of them expecting a good day at school. That good day ended around 10:23 a.m. when the first calls for help, Georgia time, came in, and then all of that huge police response that happened. So right now, when you think about it, there are students and teachers who are getting word right now that someone who shared those halls, more than one someone who shared those halls, have lost their lives or are in the hospital fighting for their lives in a trauma center, we understand. Some taken by ambulance, others rushed to the hospital by helicopter right off of that football field that you saw there outside of Appalachia High School. And so now it begins the effort of finding out their conditions, but also finding out what the motive is. And when you look at a large crime scene like this, and that is what this high school is at this hour, it is an active crime scene. That means that law enforcement have to draw a circle around it, and they have to protect the evidence that's on the inside of that. We do know one person is in custody. That person will be key and crucial in finding information about the motive here. But also, as I learned covering the Las Vegas mass shooting at the Harvest Festival in Las Vegas, all of the witnesses who saw this, people who were in that area, they also, in addition to being traumatized, in addition to being horrified, they also become police witnesses. And that is another component of this investigation as this plays out. These things become very large puzzle pieces in an overall picture that you heard the sheriff say is going to come together. And so now those students who were in that area will now be brought into rooms, and they will be asked, what did you see and when did you see it, as they try to get that picture. Now, these are live images there on the ground, and you're seeing parents start to come to that area. They've been told to go over to a football field to reunify with their student. You can see that one parent waving with one hand, a cell phone to her ear in the other hand. You can only imagine that very long and horrible walk, hoping that your student is among those that you can reunify with. All right, so let's talk about the investigation a little bit more. We want to bring in former NYPD Detective Sergeant and adjunct professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, Felipe Rodriguez. Felipe, thank you for joining us on the stream right now. This is a very large crime scene. First of all, take us to what happens in the moments after a call like that, and then we'll take this step by step through your understanding.
Well, first of all hands on deck. We have a huge campus, much larger than what we usually see in New York City. We have 1,900 students that we're responding to. We have multiple calls, I'm pretty sure, for 911 calls that are flooding the systems. So as the officers are responding, they have to try to make sense of what's going on and formulate a game plan, how we're going to address this, how we're going to respond, how we're going to get first aid to this situation, how we're going to get EMS rolling. So there's just so much going on that we have to put in place. You know, these officers have to then form a tactical response. You know, how we're going to go in there and quickly stop the immediate threat, because that's what we need to these days. No longer can we wait around and try to gather as much information as we used to before. It's what's called the immediate threat concept response. We have to actually go in there and stop that immediate threat. Things have changed, and officers have to act quickly, unfortunately. And now we are to 444 mass casualty shootings we've had, and we're only up to September 4th. Here we have the beginning of the school year, and this is what these poor children had to face. It really is heartbreaking.
And, you know, we were mentioning just a moment ago that the children who were in proximity to this violence and this shooting, they not only have trauma to deal with, the horrors of what they have seen, but also they now become witnesses. Tell us about what happens for them and how their day will be today and then the days ahead from an investigation standpoint.
From an investigation standpoint, what we have is a large crime scene. And not only that actual crime scene itself, which is the school, now we have hundreds of witnesses. We have not only physical evidence, that might be anything that's found in the school. We have to go through CCTV footage, forensic evidence, that could be anything that could be drawn from cell phones, any of the, anything that was thrown or streamed online, or anything that the suspect actually might have put out over the internet. So these investigations become very, very complex. And little by little now, are there additional, search warrants that have to be done as a result? Is the suspect, are we going to have to go back and backtrack and execute search warrants as in location? So this is something that's going to go on for days. This is not an investigation that could just be done haphazardly or in a day or two. And we talk about trauma. Remember, schemas, these are, these scars that these children are going to have to, have for the rest of their life. And this burden is going to go on. Parents are going to have to make sure that, we provide the support and counseling and the love that these children are going to need for quite a while.
Yeah, and I'm always reminded, and I was reminded in other mass shootings that I have covered, look for the helpers. And when we look at the horrors that come from a mass shooting, when we look at the horrors when bullets fly anywhere in our country, we can always look to people like you and to the people on the ground who are there helping the families. I know as we have our conversations with our kids tonight around the dinner table, that is an important quote to use, because we can look at the violence that happened, but we can also look at the response, the helpers that race to the scene. Want to also talk about the fact that we don't know much about the person who's in custody, but we can only imagine that they're going to want to now go to what car that person drove to the high school, if they drove a car there. They're going to want to go to the house where the person lived. Take us through that.
Motives are important because you know what? We're just having so many of these mass casualty shootings. We have to eventually find the root crisis. In our nation, we are suffering from mental health issues, and we're not addressing them either because we just don't have the funding or we just don't have enough personnel or medical personnel. But we're at that point that it's becoming a crisis. I don't know how it's going to get fixed, but it's got to get fixed. We just can't keep doing this anymore. At this point, the survivors of these incidents are just going to have to keep carrying this burden. And it's just something that over their lifetime, we have to be there for them. It's a horrible situation at the end of the day.
Governor of the state of Georgia has vowed that all state resources be directed to this high school, Appalachia High School, in the community of Winder, Georgia. That means that help can come not only from local law enforcement, but also state law enforcement. We also understand the FBI is a part of this. Let's talk a little bit about the interagency response there. When local, state, and federal agencies work together, that shows you it is an all-hands-on-deck situation.
It is all hands. You got to remember, a lot of smaller departments don't have the resources or sometimes, God forbid, the experience. And even in a situation like this, it's something critical that a lot of officers haven't experienced. And now, remember, think about it. These officers also have suffered a traumatic, experience that they're going to have to carry for the rest of their careers. And this might even affect the officers that responded. Also, think about the EMS personnel that are seeing things like this, the fire departments. All first responders are actually affected. And we look forward, and we need the help of, state and federal, because they do have these specialized tools. The ATF is able to quickly, ascertain the background of the firearms, which does help tremendously in the investigations, see if these firearms were purchased legally, illegally, and who we could go after. in the investigation if criminal charges, need to be, brought about as a result of it. So it's important to bring in these teams and work together.
Stay with us because I just want to update our viewers who may be logging on or tuning in to our streaming broadcast about what has happened. 10:23 a.m. Georgia time. The first calls came in from inside Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia. We understood that there was a shooter and that shooter has been taken into custody. But we've also had from 2 law enforcement sources confirmation 2 are dead, 4 are wounded. Those wounded taken, some in ambulances, some in helicopters right there from the football field there outside of that high school. What we do know is that the response happened this way. Police and emergency personnel quickly came to that scene. They immediately shut down the high school, went into lockdown. They were able to make contact with that shooter and take that shooter into custody. Once that was done, the calls for help from EMS went in. And from there, they were able to get the wounded out to ambulances and onto those helicopters, while at the same time, that huge effort of getting students out to a large football field. We've seen that large football field in helicopter video in recent moments. That is the place where parents have been told they can reunify with their students. We also understand that the wounded were taken to a trauma center, and that private pickup is now available for students. Let's listen in to a young person who's now talking to one of our CBS partners.
I've been out there for like 3 hours.
What went through your mind waiting out there, not knowing what was going on?
I was like a little scared. I was trying to make sure all my friends were okay because I heard like they got shot. But I mean,
we just learned from the sheriff's office that 2 people died in this and that several others were injured. When you heard that, what went through your mind?
It was sad because I know I go to school here. That could have been one of my friends I don't know of and stuff. It sucked really bad.
We hear about these happening. For this to happen at your school, it's everyone's worst nightmare.
Yeah, it really is. I thought it was just like movies and stuff like that or something. I never thought it'd be at my school.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm perfect.
Yeah. Glad to be going home.
A little bit. I wish I could have got my stuff, but it is what it is.
Thank you. Glad you're okay, and I hope all of your friends are okay too.
Me too.
Yeah. Thank you. Y'all be safe.
All right, so our local partners there just gathering the accounts of students on the inside of that high school. That student now walking on foot to go home. Glad to be alive. And when we just stop for a second, we realize, it's easy for us in the news business to give you numbers and police procedure, but it's also very important that we just stop and remember that there are real people involved in this story, families who are on the run to get to the high school, students like that who are walking home shaking. Everybody involved in this story is somebody's somebody. And so our local partners there with CBS know that they are on the ground there. They are talking and getting those real-life accounts. Let's go back to some of their coverage in real time.
Watching as this has developed throughout the day since this happened. Again, they said they got the call about an active shooter at this Appalachia High School around 9:30 in the morning. It's 1:30 right now, and there are still parents who are there trying to get together with their kids, hoping their kids are not one of these victims. Multiple victims involved. We do not know the names or the ages or the grades right now. One suspect is in custody. We don't know if that's a student, if this is one of their classmates, or if this is somebody random, or if this was a former student. There are a lot of questions that I know a lot of people were hoping were going to be answered in this press conference. But again, because this is such a rapidly developing situation, and because they are still finding so much evidence by the minute, he said, they weren't able to give us that much information.
Yeah, he asked for patience.
Yeah.
And I think it's understandable under the circumstances. You have to let law enforcement do its job and figure out exactly what went on. They certainly don't want to share any information that then turns out not to be accurate.
Right.
And so they did talk about another press conference coming up in about 3.5 hours, 4 p.m. It's coming up on 1:30 here. And if you're just joining us, it's been a terrible day in Barrow County at Appalachia High School, where there's been a shooting and there are multiple people who are injured. One suspect is in custody. We have law enforcement from all over the state and even federal law enforcement there on the scene, conducting an investigation into exactly what went down. You see the students there who were evacuated to the football field for safety. Right now, parents have been driving frantically to the school, to the campus. Some of them having to park, though, as far away as about a mile or so, as close as they could get. Those parents then getting out of their vehicles and on foot, walking all the way to the campus for a reunion that they are hoping and praying takes place soon with their children.
Now, we have team coverage today. We have reporters all around this school, so we know the moment there's a new development out there. One of them is Yasmina Alston. Yasmina, we understand you've just spoken with someone. What can you tell us?
Lana, I just had the chance to speak with a 15-year-old student at the high school. He had just gotten picked up from the football stadium. He was with his mom. He was with his sister. They were all understandably shaken up by what happened, but he did walk us through what happened inside of the school. He says they heard the gunshots in the classroom. He tells me that his teacher immediately closed the door, locked the door, had them hunker down. They had no idea what was happening, but he says they immediately jumped into action to get into that lockdown position. I asked him what went through his mind during that time, and his main concern was, are his friends okay? Are his classmates okay? Because there were so little answers coming into the classroom. Of course, at that time when they were still on lockdown, he was concerned about his friends. He was concerned about his classmates. He said the gunshots sounded very close to the classroom that they were in. He tells me that, you know, the entire time that they were in the football stadium waiting to get picked up and waiting to get any answers, they were sad. I mean, they were disturbed by what happened. And he says, you know, you hear about this happening in other places. He never imagined that this would be happening at his school, that this would be happening and you know, that his classmates would have to go into a lockdown, that they would be experiencing an active shooting situation. He says it's something they've talked about in the classroom before, but never did he imagine that something like this would actually happen. He says those hours waiting in the football stadium to be picked up by his parents, he says those were some of the longest hours that he's experienced because he just didn't know. When he heard about, you know, the two fatalities, he has so many questions. He wants to know, you know, who are they and are his friends okay? Are his classmates okay? He told us that he's very happy to have the chance to go home now. His mom also, you know, very shaken up by what happened, but also relieved that she was able to get her son.
Yasmina, very quickly, can you just give us a quick look at the scene around you? We can see you're in front of the school. I can see the school sign there behind you. Are parents coming there? Is that road still blocked off? What's the scene there behind you?
Yeah, so the road is still blocked off. They're letting select people come through down this road. We've, of course, still seen a lot of law enforcement coming down here, getting closer to the high school. We're actually in front of the middle school here, and they're also on lockdown. We've had a lot of parents who've been coming here hoping to get their child, but one person did tell us that that would probably be another hour or so before they were able to get anyone out of the middle school. We have seen tons of families making this walk, many walking at least a mile to try to get as close as possible to the high school to get their children and to get their loved ones. So it is still very active over here as well, but there is a law enforcement presence at the end of the road, and they are directing who is able to come down here and get closer to the high school. And you can see off in the distance there all of the people that are
you are watching CBS News 24/7, continuing coverage, acquisitioning the force of our CBS partners there in Georgia to tell the story. Parents walking for a mile or more to get to their students, not knowing where their students are, the condition of their students. You also heard one student's account there saying he was glad to get the opportunity to go home. 2 students will never get that opportunity again, according to 2 law enforcement officials. 4 others are fighting for their lives in trauma center there in Georgia, just about an hour outside of Atlanta. So let's bring in former FBI Executive Assistant Director Josh School. Josh, horrible day in America. We're now seeing it once again. That high school now a crime scene.
It is a horrible day, and it's unfortunate that with every start of the school year that we are going to endure this as a society and see this happen repeatedly. It's horrible, and I feel for the families.
So as we await word on who the victims are and their individual stories, and as we await word on what no doubt first responders and trauma nurses are dealing with helping the 4 students that were taken by ambulance and by helicopter to hospitals, in your experience as a former FBI executive assistant director, what is happening there on the ground with law enforcement?
So law enforcement needs to ensure that the scene is safe, first and foremost. Before anything else, they need to make sure that there's no additional shooters, even though there's no reporting of an additional shooter, they still need to make sure that's happening. They want to make sure that they've recovered all of the victims. So initial reports are always wrong, and so they need to clear that school for additional threat and to make sure there's no additional victims. And while the families are walking a long distance to be reunited with their children, which is unfortunate, it is essential that law enforcement have a logical, orderly reunification policy, and that they maintain that the roads are open to get emergency personnel in and out of the scene.
I often think about families who are there at that football field at the reunification center, and as they watch child after child be released to the parents, you've got to think that in that crowd are the parents who belong to the students who are wounded or the people who are killed. At what point did those parents learn about the fate of their students, or will this just be a long, horrible, agonizing day waiting?
Well, as soon as they got a report that there was an active shooter at this high school, the day became agonizing for all of those parents, and it became worse for a small subset, which is really heart-wrenching. So they're going to wait way too long, and unfortunately, that is the process. With today's social media and cell phone access, undoubtedly they have identified those children and made attempts to ensure that they could meet them at the hospital, or unfortunately the ones that look like they were life flighted out of there can meet them at the appropriate facility. I think the reporting is going to start to come out right now, and parents have been reunited, or at least been able to make contact with those that have cell phones or using their friend's cell phone.
It's just humbling and gives all of us pause to think that only weeks ago these kids were picking out school shoes with their parents. And now they're dealing with some tragically very adult things to think about. We appreciate you joining us on the stream. Stay with us. We may come back to you here in just a minute, but we do have an opportunity to go to CBS News national correspondent Dave Malkoff. He joins us now live from that scene. Dave, nobody better to take us through the scene and to set the scene. What are you seeing there, and what are you feeling?
Hi there, Reed. Yeah, we are just arriving here, and what else is arriving is the FBI field office from Atlanta. They've just arrived here in front of the school. It takes about an hour to get from Atlanta to here, and that is one of the bottlenecks that parents are running into. We did talk to a woman whose son was in the 10th grade hallway. He's in 12th grade, but her son was in the 10th grade hallway, and according to a neighbor, that was near the incident. So that's what we heard from the neighbor that we just talked to. So she was closer here, but she had to walk for 2.5 miles to get here. She said, if that was my son, I would have walked 10 miles to get here. And this is the situation that a lot of people are going through. People who want to get to their children are being held back because
Dave,
of the traffic.
I just want to jump in. My apologies to you. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland is stepping to the mic. We anticipate he will have something to say about this as well.
We did so because countless Americans were enduring terrible threats simply for doing their civic duty. And we did so because threats to election workers constitute threats to our democracy itself. In just a few minutes, the task force here will meet to discuss its continuing work in advance of the upcoming election. But before we begin, I want to address the tragic shooting that occurred this morning at a high school in Winder, Georgia. We are still gathering information, but the FBI and ATF are on the scene, working with state, local, and federal partners. I'm devastated for the families who have been affected by this terrible tragedy. The Justice Department stands ready to provide any resources or support that the Winder community needs in the days ahead. Before I get to the work of the task force, I also want to announce 2 major law enforcement actions that the Justice Department is taking that are separate from the important work of this task force, but are part of our broader effort to protect our elections from unlawful interference of any kind. First,
all right, so you just heard the comments of U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland about the shooting that took place in Georgia. We started our day here at CBS News 24/7 knowing he was going to step to the mic to talk about election interference by Russia. That's also very important, and we will turn that sound around for you here on CBS News 24/7 in just a little while. So while he is talking and addressing the nation about keeping our elections safe and secure, we feel it's very important to stay with that story in Georgia. Now, once again, law enforcement sources, 2 independent law enforcement sources confirmed 2 dead. We don't know if they're students or teachers or staff there at Appalachia High School, and 4 others fighting for their lives after a school shooting. The first calls came in around 9:30 a.m. Georgia time. And we have an opportunity now to go back to Dave Malkoff, CBS News' Dave Malkoff, on the scene. Dave, before the Attorney General, before I interrupted you for the Attorney General's comments about this shooting, you were taking us through that bottleneck for parents to get there. You were mentioning that one parent said, hey, I had to walk miles, but I'd walk 10 miles to get to my student.
Yeah, speaking of that, it's hard for ambulances and first responders to get through here. We just seconds ago, while Merrick Garland was talking, we actually saw another medevac helicopter land here in the front of the school just behind me, possibly pick up somebody. Helicopter that has gone through here. CBS News has confirmed that there are 2 people who have been killed in this shooting, at least 4 people injured. As for the parents who came running from here, Atlanta is at least an hour from here, and we talked to a woman whose next door neighbor has a son in this school behind me, and he was inside the school when the shooting happened around 9:30 this morning, and he was able to get word out to his mom, but his mom was all the way in the Atlanta area. If you're familiar with Atlanta, that's in the Alpharetta area that she was over there. It would take her forever to get here through this traffic and this lockdown. So what she did was she called her neighbor, who was about 15 minutes away. She ran about 2.5 miles to get here to hug her neighbor's child and to tell him everything's all right, your mom's on the way. And that was the moment where they connected. Then he had to go to the back of the school, Reed, where he met up with all of his fellow students who are potentially being interviewed by either GBI, which is the local version of the FBI here in Georgia. The FBI has just arrived on scene just a few minutes ago. There is state police. There is local to solve this crime that is all too familiar here in the United States, Reed.
All too familiar, and what is also becoming all too familiar is the dual experience of kids who otherwise would be learning to read and write and do arithmetic and get ready for college, and that is the fact that they are trauma victims and also crime witnesses here in these United States. Dave Malkoff with a picture of what happened there inside the high school. I'm here, my producer telling me, where are we going, Adam? We're going to go now to the coverage of our local affiliate, WANF, out of Atlanta right now, as they look at all of the students who are gathered there outside the perimeter of that high school in that reunification area.
We've seen a number of law enforcement from multiple agencies, as we've been saying, not just local, but state and federal law enforcement as well, wearing tactical gear, many of them armed. We saw a group of law enforcement officers walking to what looked like the front entryway of the building at one point early on, getting ready to enter into a building where they might not have known exactly what kind of threat they were going to face. And so the bravery on the part of these first responders, of these members of law enforcement that put their own lives on the line in order to keep us safe and our loved ones safe, it really just must be mentioned and should not go unnoticed as we see these pictures again and the students. And you can only imagine what it was like for these kids and what it will be like for these kids who were just starting a Wednesday morning at school when all of a sudden an evil thing happened, in the words of Sheriff Judd Smith of Barrow County. An evil thing when someone came in, that person in custody, we're told, and that there are multiple injuries. CBS News reporting that 2 people have died. The sheriff telling us in a brief press conference a few moments ago that they want to make sure they get this right, and that right now the priority is reuniting students with parents, or that's, I'm sorry, one of the priorities,
right.
is reuniting parents and students, and that's a bit of a chaotic situation, as you can imagine. 1,900 students enrolled in the school. That's what we've been able to find out. And so that's a lot of kids and a lot of parents and loved ones who were trying to get them back together. And the sheriff asked that the media and the public be patient as they work to get more information, to conduct this investigation, to find out the answers to these questions that we all have, which of course is, who would do this? Why would they do this? Who was injured? How serious are those injuries? And if these reports turn out to be true, that there are 2 people killed, my goodness, who are they? What were they doing at the time? You know, having covered many, many school shootings, a lot of times the people who work closest to the front entryway are among the first victims, because whoever it is that comes in through the front door usually comes in ready to do damage. And I remember covering this shooting in Parkland, covering the shooting at Sandy Hook years ago, that it was the front office staff, the principal at Sandy Hook, who was shot and killed. Now, we don't know exactly who was injured or who might have been killed here today. I'm just saying that a lot of times it is those who work closest to the front entrance of a school when there's a shooting like this who are among the first victims.
And what a shame that we have perspective on this from other school shootings that we've had in our country. But, you know, we all know at this point, the collective, all of us know how these things go right now. There are many different scenarios that could have played out. We do not know if the suspect who is in custody was a student, or if this was a stranger, or if this was an employee, or if this was a former student. These are the questions that we are waiting for right now. Just a couple hours left until we are expected to be briefed again by law enforcement. They gave a very brief press conference and essentially said they know we are all waiting for information. We have been standing here live watching this happen with you for hours, waiting on information. Unfortunately, he says right now this scene is just so rapidly developing. He literally said they were finding new evidence by the minute. So there wasn't anything he could give us with concrete evidence that points to what happened here. So, you know, as we take a live look around the school, at one point it was very chaotic out there, and then at some point it shifted a bit to where you're seeing right now, where there wasn't a lot of commotion. Things seemed a bit calmer, albeit there's, you know, a lot of law enforcement presence still out there on the scene. But we don't know what's happening in the school right now. In the school, there are likely droves of law enforcement. GBI is on scene right now. FBI Atlanta is on scene right now. Multiple local law enforcement agencies, surrounding counties. We've had Atlanta and other cities say, hey, if you need any help, any assistance, we're here for you. Other school districts in our areas have said to parents, they put out a note saying, hey, we know you're watching this as well. We know you're wondering how safe your students are. And they assured parents that there are a lot of safety measures in place to prevent something so horrific. Unfortunately, somehow this has happened. And I think a lot of us have questions as to how.
We are also waiting to hear from the White House. We know that President Biden has been briefed on this. He has offered, of course, all federal resources to the teams on the ground. In fact, we have seen federal officers on the scene this morning wearing FBI-marked jackets. So we know that they're there, and we know that they will play a role in this investigation. We don't know which agency will take over the lead role. A lot of times that is something that is determined between the different agencies, depending on exactly what the crime is. And so we'll learn more about that who will be the lead investigative agency here. But we are expecting to hear from President Biden, I'm sorry, we are expecting to hear from the White House.
Yes.
We may or may not hear from the president himself, but the White House is expected to hold some type of a press briefing very soon. So, of course, we'll bring you that as well. We think about how long these investigations can take. I mean, I'll remind everybody that it was mid-July, almost 2 months ago now, when there was an assassination attempt on former President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, and where one person was killed and several people were injured, including the former president himself. That investigation is still ongoing, and police have not been able to determine a motive in that case. Of course, the shooter in that instance was killed by law enforcement, snipers. So it's obviously the police were not able to talk with him to try to get more information on a potential motive. But again, it just gives you an idea of how long it takes sometimes to get concrete answers. We all want to know the answers immediately, but again, the sheriff said be patient, and that unfortunately is what we're going to have to be here because it could take a while until we learn the answers to all of the questions that we have right now.
Okay, now we're just getting some new information. As we've told you, we have many reporters on scene here and in our studio digging for answers, trying to get you the most updated information. We also have John Decker. He is here joining us with more information on the federal response. So, John, what do you know?
Well, the president has been briefed by his Homeland Security advisor. That was earlier today. We learned this through a pool report which went out about an hour or so ago. And the president is now meeting with his advisors and coordinating some sort of federal response. We also know, according to another pool report, that the vice president has also been briefed. There's no word as to whether or not the president will address the media. We know that the White House press briefing has been pushed back until after the 2 o'clock hour today, and perhaps we'll get some more information coming from the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre.
John, unfortunately, we have covered these situations too many times to count. And it is just unacceptable. And every time we hear from the president afterwards, and they talk about things that they would like to do, policies that they would like to put in place, legislation that they would like to introduce and get passed that might help to prevent something like this from happening again. But the sad reality is that no president has been able to come up with any kind of a magic solution to this. It just keeps happening, and it doesn't matter who's in the White House.
You're absolutely right about that. I remember being in the White House and having President Obama come out to address the press in the White House press briefing room after that shooting that occurred at Sandy Hook in Connecticut. And I thought, personally, that was the tipping point. That was the tipping point for having Congress come forward with some meaningful legislation or policy proposals that would certainly decrease the amount of these types of episodes from happening in the future. And it didn't happen then, and it hasn't happened since. And I think that's the really frustrating thing for any leader, whether you're talking about a Democrat like President Barack Obama, a Republican like President Trump in the last administration, or President Biden right now. We are likely to hear from the vice president a little bit later today. She's in New Hampshire today campaigning, but I am certain that she will address reporters, talk to reporters about what happened in Georgia earlier today.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to inject politics into this,
right.
But obviously there is an election coming up, and we have two candidates who are running to be the next president of the United States. I would think that they would have to say something, right?
Well, certainly you would expect that from our leaders. And as it relates to the two candidates, I mentioned what the vice president is doing today, and I would certainly expect her to talk about this terrible tragedy happening earlier today, another one in Georgia.
John Decker, our White House correspondent.
A town hall prepared that will take place this evening in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It's with Fox News, and certainly I would expect the interviewer there, the moderator of that event, Sean Hannity, to ask about that, if not having a question posed to the former president by those in the audience in Pennsylvania.
Former President Trump was in office when the shooting in Parkland took place. And that was another scenario where you thought maybe something will be done. And in fact, there was some legislation that came from that awful tragedy. And former President Trump did hold, I remember, several meetings with the victims and different stakeholders in the Parkland shooting at the White House. And then something happened, right?
Well, yes,
right.
something did.
We are
happen.
on national broadcast here at CBS News 24/7, but as we say all the time, all stories are local stories. You've been listening to local coverage out of Atlanta with our CBS partners. Once again, a shooting at a high school not long after class went into session today. Multiple law enforcement sources now reporting 2 dead, multiple injured in that shooting in Widener, Georgia, about an hour outside of Atlanta. You heard them talking about policy and policy questions. Let's take it now back to the people. There are young people who are traumatized once again in these United States. There are parents who are traumatized, who are on the way, some of them walking miles to get to their students who are right now corralled in a reunification center. There are first responders in hospitals. You are looking live at one of those hospitals. This is Grady Hospital. That is a trauma center, and that is where ambulance after ambulance and helicopter after helicopter transported those who were shot today on what was supposed to be a school day. Keep it here on CBS News 24/7, where we will continue to report what we do know. We'll continue getting answers to what we do not know, and we'll continue to try to find answers to what we should know.